Well, good morning. That's what it is for me here on top of Mount Shasta, just catching an early morning stretch and listening to the birds, watching the little animals kind of run across the ground there. They're kind of cute in the morning, very spry, high energy. And I'm getting ready here for Memorial Weekend, so I thought I'd say good morning on this wonderful day. The mist is rolling in across the mountain, and it's very, very peaceful. And I'm very thankful for that. The air is real brisk, and so keeping the windows open, one has a tendency to produce a little mucus. So if I clear my throat and things like that, it's this fresh air up here. It's fantastic. I'll cough a little, and then that'll just kind of float through the tape on you guys, and and you'll see a little puff of smoke come off the tape. That'll be cute. A little bit of mist brought in from Mount Shasta to you via the tape. And a little smile and a laugh also, just in case you've forgotten to lighten up. I know personally I have forgotten to lighten up for, about 3 weeks. I don't know how you guys were doing out there, but wow. I've stayed light in the overall aspect, but I've learned a lot about some of my old physical habits that seem to come up from old concepts that we have in there. And then all of a sudden we begin to believe in those old concepts again if we get caught. And the next thing you know is you're right back down there in the rat race. You've heard me talk about repetition. Now, in a day, what we repeat is basically a day's worth of repetition on the material plane, on the physical plane, one aspect of ourself, on the physical plane. And we get caught in the vicious circle. The repetition of work, the repetition of all of the moans and groans that apply to that aspect, or the repetition of the hype that we use on the positive side in order to get that energy rush out of our job. But whatever it is, it's a repetition on physical plane, and there's emotions sometimes tied behind those. And it can put you into what I have noticed myself to be in the past there, a slump. And yet not a slump, because you will notice as you grow that even though the physical plane is really, apparently from the way another person would look at it, taking a beating, you have learned that there's also spirit within the physical plane. So I noticed that spirit part of me, or that higher aspect, the self-realized part of yourself, the piece of you that recognizes what the heck is going on. You notice that while you're sitting from there, you are not taking it personally, which means you are not banging around as much as you would have in the past. I noticed that these 3 weeks, I got into a slump and I observed it. In other words, I witnessed the whole thing. I witnessed how I was cranky. I witnessed how I would yell or shout something that I don't normally do, and yet I would watch the clarification in it. I would watch how it would affect people. I would watch to see why it was that I was yelling at myself. See, basically, if I'm yelling at anyone, it's myself, because it's never outside of myself. And so I would watch and observe those actions. I would see how those actions would affect others on that physical plane. I would, from an emotional point, which I wasn't even clear enough to see, in other words, Sometimes we think of an emotion, and yes, it has to drop a chemical down into the system, and then you run through the emotion, and then you clear through it. But some emotional aspects, if not checked, can lull you. In other words, they can take over, an emotional aspect can take over for weeks and put you to sleep so slick and sly that you don't even know that you're producing this chemical in your body continuously to kind of put you in a la-la land, so that you are totally unaware of your self. The physical, structural self, because you're down there just going, what's wrong with everybody? Why is everybody so intense on me? Why isn't this working? What am I doing wrong? Da-dun, 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 da-dun. And we get into this thing because all of a sudden it's not going the way we want. We start fumbling around on the physical plane, almost getting more engrossed in it, and it is grosser. And to try and figure out what we're not doing right so that we can get back on center, when the Spirit knows you're always on center all of the time. So if you don't take it personal, you can stand back from the Spirit aspect and witness what you're doing, which gives you an unbelievable learning aspect for yourself. Pay attention to why you're out there in what some people would call a struggle. And if you are witnessing it from your higher self, you'll be able to see what it was that you did to create this. You'll also be able to see how you got caught in the emotional chemical that works in you 24 hours a day. It kind of puts you asleep. And then heightens the physical aspects. Makes it seem more important. It matters more. And so therefore, it's not that you forget about your divinity, but you kind of have so many chemicals in your body, it's really tough to stay centered. However, what you're trying to achieve here is your realization of spirit and matter simultaneously. It's done by not taking it personal. If you don't take it personal, the spiritual aspect of yourself, or the higher aspect of yourself, or the part that's trying to become self-realized, looks out there and says, wow, I see all these chemicals in my body. I've just noticed this. I also know that I can jump out of this mode at any time I want. I can see that it may not instantaneously happen because of the chemicals, because of my own thinking process, that certain things may take a certain length of time. Okay, I can see all of these things, and then all of a sudden sometimes the chemical rushes back through you, and then you slip back into this, wow, this really matters, I'll push harder, I'll do more, I'll go out and teach more seminars, I'll smash my head harder against the ground, all for the sake of loving, and sometimes we miss the point, because we think we're creating a divine aspect when we're just another person running around in the rat race, just like everybody else. But when we begin to raise ourselves and notice this by not taking it personally, the higher self goes, wow, look at what you're doing here, person. Look at what you are creating here. Wow, so that's what it means by self-creation. Oh, so that's how I created this. So that's how that happened. That only takes a split second. And you want to do it by staying in present time. You see, by staying in present time is the way you're capable of seeing all of these things manifest. See, present time is very important. You must stay in present time. That's not dogmatic, that's not any of those things. But if you really want to get full acceleration, one of the things that I've observed is that you have to stay in present time, because by staying in present time, you become more enhanced to all of the aspects that you really are. You're able to see yourself beating yourself up down on the physical plane. You're able to look around, because you're not taking it personally, at all of the things that fit in perfection, that made that particular lesson so beautiful. And by you not taking it personally, you go, oh, wow, man, I get this, because you're not in your way. You're totally centered, you're on top of it, you're aware of what is going on, because you're in the moment in time, and you're able to see more aspects, more things that fit into the picture. Instead of, like on the physical plane, you have more of a tunnel vision. You are only aware, apparently, of the things in front of your eyes, in front of your nose, in front of your mouth, around your ears, and when you become more aware in that world, you will also then, when you become more aware in that world, you also are allowed to witness it from a higher aspect. If you fall asleep down there in that world, or in this world, then the higher self doesn't get to see the big picture, and the vision narrows down from something that can span maybe, just to give you an idea, 1,000 feet, into something where you can only see 1.5 feet, and you have to squint to see that because you've limited yourself by making an opinion, which stopped 50% of your input, which closed your lens down. Instead of seeing like a whole city block, now you can only see in front of your nose, just because the intellectual shut down 50%. When you shut down 50% of your totality, wow, you shut down a lot of stuff. That zoom lens closes way down. That's what your third eye is about. It's telescopic, besides all-seeing eye. Telescopic means it opens up 360 degrees around you. Don't think in linear terms like a telescope. And so you shut down your senses. And you stop being able to observe without an opinion, because you get sucked into it. And if you've got chemicals in your body, it's a tough road to pull out. And yet, it's not, because you created whatever it was that you needed to grow from. See, it's never outside of yourself. You are the master creator. Everything that is going on around you is going on specifically because, as a divine aspect, this is what you've created for yourself. You've created a personality to manifest it in a certain way. You've created a certain environment to manifest it in a certain way. These are your tools. Who you are, these are your tools. And when you become clear with your tools, the very basic things that you've learned how to get through life with, you refine these tools now and realize that they're just part of a gigantic aspect rather than the whole thing. And then you begin to see the whole world as it is, a real aspect of perfection, because it's divinity. And you get to see that because that's what you become. So you can only see where you're at. And if you believe that you're just in the material plane, and you affirm that basically all day long, if you're thinking in the material plane, even if you're thinking about God in the material plane and it's taking your physical material time, then that's a picture of God. That's not really your spiritual aspect. That's just God rap. Using those, if you'll notice, how often do you talk about God? How often do you talk about the material plane? And then you can see how repetitious you are on the physical plane. You need to enhance your spirit by becoming non-judgmental, and by becoming non-judgmental, you sit back and you become a witness, see? You allow your spirit to see more. You allow your spirit to see why this particular individual or aspect or place or vehicle or substance bums you out. Because that's where you're giving all your power. If you are thinking to that, that's where you're giving all of your power to. Yes, do that on the physical plane so that you can see what's going on, but also be the spirit and observe it. See, if you observe it, it's like having the answers to the test. See, going out in the world is the test. But if you can sit there and witness it, you got the answers to the test. All you have to do is become non-judgmental, and that's how that works. If you become non-judgmental, you begin to open yourself up. You begin to see why things happen, because all things are in perfection. See, when you're looking at them from the physical plane, by making a judgment, you've either seen it right or wrong, good or bad. And so now you can't see how the good parts played into that and how the negative parts played into that, because there's a plus aspect and a minus aspect, which always makes perfection at what it is that you're looking at, because you are a God. Your vision, however, is shut or open depending on how many judgments, evaluations, and buying into the game you're going to make on the physical level, on the emotional level, on the mental level. Now the spirit, see, wants to witness all of this. The spirit is not one of those aspects. It's not physical, it's not emotional, it's not mental. It's all of those combined. It's sort of like the Trinity. It's all of that piece put together. And it oversees all three of those things. And different things connect these two bodies. Will connects these two bodies. Intuition connects these two bodies. The subtler things that interlock, those states of consciousness that we'll talk about at other times, that give you the insights between physical and spirit so that you can observe more. See, if you're down here busy judging or blaming or any of those things, then you don't have a whole lot of time to be witnessing. And the more intent it becomes on the physical plane, the less the spirit is capable of seeing, because you become so blinded that this really matters. I mean, it is a matter of life and death. You're going to give up weekends. You're going to give up hours. You're going to frustrate yourself. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. I mean, we're all people. I run a business like you go to work or you run a business. It's the same thing. I go to work on weekends. I run a business. You go to work. You run businesses. We all do the same thing. We all get caught up on the physical plane. I've been able to witness 3 weeks of garbage and believing for the sake that it was all correct. Of course, when you are teaching in a workshop, it's a different aspect, because you are the totality, obviously, because you're directly instructing. Like now, I'm the totality. I'm directly instructing. I'm the witness. I'm the spirit. And the aspect, it's very clear, it comes right on through. Personality sits down, it knows it knows totality. It knows on command of the will when it sits down and relaxes and gets off of it. The emotions know when to shut off and get out of the way, that the totality is now in process. Or not process, the totality is now in existence. And by being in present time, it just allows all those things to happen. See, it's very important not to judge. Maybe this perspective will give you a little different aspect on the judgment of things. The reason that you're not judging is so that you can see the whole picture. The thing that we do first is when somebody tells us something that we don't want to hear or doesn't fit with our pattern, we want to go into a concept to judge them for what they're saying to us. Because we have a pattern that sits inside of us, or an old concept that sits inside of us, and as soon as we hear material that corresponds to that concept that we have, in other words, a concept like, I don't like your animal in my house. That's a concept. And I use that one because people either have pets or they don't have pets. I never had pets when I lived in a house, but when I lived in the woods, I had all kinds of pets. Bears, chickens, pigs, everything. I mean, it was far out. And so as far as opinions go, I don't know, I guess each person has one. And that's why I picked that particular subject. If somebody says something against a concept that you have on that material, you will immediately go into blaming that individual. Because your ideas on that concept are very, very limited. They're very, very tight. They're very, very structured. And so something that would be said that wouldn't ring true to you would throw you off your center, and you would get into the physical plane because, of course, it mattered. And then you would lose sometimes the spiritual witnessing aspect, because you get drawn into it so fast. And you know how quickly sometimes you get sucked into an argument or a debate, and like you really ruffle your feathers. Even though you're telling yourself you're clear, you're still going through your stuff. You ain't thinking of God. You ain't standing there watching it as a witness. if you can pull yourself down, if your voice is louder than average, you ain't watching nothing from afar. You are smack dab into it. And so laugh to yourself, lighten up, give yourself a break. And just by doing that, you'll break the spell. And by breaking the spell, you'll be able to go, boy, I can sure see how I got pulled into that. Now, why don't I just relax back, take a good look at this, be in present time. By being in present time, how do I feel about whatever the situation is right now? Is it some hypothetical question? If it is, do I really need it anymore? Do I want to keep attracting it to myself? Is there something I haven't quite learned in this aspect yet? That's why I'm creating it out there to see what it's about. Of course, I know the individual who's brought it up to me is a divine being of light, because only light can teach light. Darkness doesn't come into the light. You're the creator. Do you create darkness? Then if you do, that's who's creating it there. But it's a light being, because only the higher stages can move things around. Here's a being that's not involved at all, unless they plug in together. Then you're each learning what it is that you've created together to learn from. But each of you will perceive things from a different way. And so, it can be carried to any extreme. The key here is, don't take it personal. If you don't take it personal, you'll be able to observe it. If you're able to observe it, you're able to grow through it. If you involve yourself down into the physical plane and put out a whole lot of energy in that dimension, that energy, for every action there's a like and equal reaction. That energy is going to make a round circle, come on back to you. And then you're going to get a chance to try it again. And it doesn't really even matter what the subject material it is. Did you lose your center? Did you become a jerk? Keep it light. Check out and see what's going on. And because it's every moment in time, you can pull yourself out. Now, I didn't do a whole lot of laughing during those 3 weeks, except for when I was teaching and lightening up and having a good time. And now I can sit here and laugh at that. Sure, I'm not in it right now. Then I was just, I was about one hair on the top of my head short of submerging. Well, there's other tapes coming out. You'll hear all about it. Because I always share. Hey, this is what it's all about. Sharing, growing, loving, caring. Let's see. So this this judgmental thing that we have, I hear a lot of people when I'm out on the road say, wow, this is really some hard stuff. It just seems like you always want to judge. Well, instead of using the word judge, see, you want to pick out another word that works for you, that in your vocabulary, instead of using the repetition, boy, I've been judging myself too hard, I've been judging myself, I've been judging myself. Pick another word that has more of a positive connotation. Let me think here for an example. I've been really working on myself diligently. No, I've been really, that works. Or I would use, I've been really hard at play with myself lately. I've really been growing here lately, instead of using the word judgment, so that you can audibly hear some positive feedback, some positive sound. Your mental attitude of manifesting on the physical plane the highest thought without having to change the words as much as possible is another thing that would be helpful there. See, the mind and the physical have to work together. I know you've got to get the words to match what the mind is thinking, but the mind has to be repeating the thought all the time in order to get the words to change so that it starts to do what the mind is projecting out there, as long as you feel good about what's happening. There has to be a blending of these things. See, let me kind of put this together. In order to not judge, you can't take it personal. And so that's one key. You want to be able to witness and see from a broader sense of the term vision. You want to be able to perceive with totality. You have to do some sort of repetition form down on the physical plane to snap yourself out of the repetition that you're always on the physical plane. You want to raise into the spiritual plane, so therefore you want to have some repetition on witnessing through most of the day, so that you can get the habit of giving the mental mind, starting off with a few minutes, and into a few hours, and then into a half a day, and then into a whole day, where your higher aspect of the divine is constantly aware that it is divine while the physical plane is taking care of the physical plane. If you are in every moment in time, you'll see if you're out there making evaluations or judgments or learning and growing, or however you choose to start moderating the talk, so that you can physically structure yourself to be propelled back into the spirit automatically, programmed into you by yourself, by your repetition of thinking of yourself in terms of a witness, just being the observer throughout the day, starting to build a repetition from the spirit aspect, so that you can start seeing more of what is going on. When you see more of what is going on, you will find that you will be making less judgment, less evaluation, less playing time, less growing aspect on that one thing, and you will find that you won't be as hard on the physical unit. Now, not being as hard on the physical unit means that the aging process will start to slow down. The age lines that people put on their face through worry and stuff will start to ease up, because you will not be stressing out those parts of the body in order to keep your growing experience going. I mean, that's why you crave